Alright, what's up everybody? In this video I'm going to show you my top 5 Waves plugins for mastering. I'm only going to be using Waves and I'm going to go through every single one detailed for you so you can see what they do and why I like to use them. Here's a little clip of a track that we're going to be using for this example. Pretty simple. It's all instrumental. There's no vocals in it. We're going to go ahead over to the master track, and the first thing that I have in there is the Abbey Roads mastering chain. I'm sure you guys have heard of this. A lot of people are talking about it. It's a really cool plugin, but you can get carried away and you can do too much. So I'm going to show you guys exactly what I do when I like to use this plugin and why it's very useful. On here you have tape equalizer, your input level, which is kind of like a gain. You have balance from left and right. That would be if something was off, and you have phase. For this one, everything's in phase. Everything's good to go, so we're not going to mess with the balance or the phase, but we are going to mess with the tape EQ a little bit here, and I'll show you exactly what that does. So basically all the tape EQ does is it's going to give you a different characteristic of kind of like a modeled tape machine. It's going to EQ it in a certain way that different frequencies are coming up, and each one's a little bit different. So if you could tell, some of them kind of had like a higher mid frequency boost in that area, and then some of them had more of low pass on it. I think it's really cool, models it in a good way, and you can get some cool characteristics from that. But if you have your mix sitting exactly where you want it and you don't want it to be changed in that way, and you like it exactly how it is, for the most part, I would say leave it at flat, and that's kind of a good indicator that you had a really good mix. If you can leave it at flat and that's where it sounds the best, then your mix is pretty much spot on and you only need to touch up a couple things. So I like to keep mine around flat. If you did want to boost it even more and have even more saturation and more characteristic from the tape modeler, then you would just take your input and you would boost that up. I'm going to put it on a random setting here. I'm going to boost the input and show you kind of how that works. So as you can see, that kind of just added a little bit more saturation as well as gain to the overall mix. So for now I'm just going to leave it at 0 and I'm going to leave it at flat. Moving on to the EQ, this can get really touchy, pretty precise, and you can go out of hand with it very quickly. So I'm going to show you kind of some spots where I like to boost, and I pretty much leave it all the same here with the settings, the default settings. I like where the frequency ranges are at, which is actually your first knob. You have your frequency here, and then you have how much gain from that frequency that you're taking away or giving, and then you have your shape, such as that you can see in a parametric EQ, whether it be bell or high, which is like a high shelf. You have a low shelf, like a medium bell or something, and then just I guess SH would be shelf, maybe kind of like a smaller shelf than if you were to select high. But I kind of leave them here where they are. I don't mind doing that, and I've had some pretty good success working with it this way. But if you were having trouble, boosting something or getting rid of something, you could always change it to a smaller shape, and that'll probably help you out. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you what I like to change with it. pretty much it. I do very subtle changes on this because, like I said before, it can get really out of hand really quick. And if you could tell in the mid-range here, which is about 2K, it's got a bell shape on it. So it's a lot tighter. You're in that specific frequency range, and it's only moving that range. It's not capturing other parts, not going into 1K and up to 3K and kind of moving that around and staying right in that 2K range because I have a tight bell shape on it. If you did want to affect other ranges in the area, you want a bigger range to move around, that's when you would select your different shapes. So I kind of like this setting on here. I left most of it flat, just a little boost in the upper range and a little boost in the mid. It's one thing to keep in mind when you're mastering, especially if you guys don't have a sub or a pair of headphones to reference on. It's kind of hard to tell where your low end is, and you definitely don't want to be adding a ton of low end. If anything, in the master, you want to be kind of reducing that low end. So moving on, we have a limiting section here. It doesn't give you a whole lot of options. It gives you makeup, which is your gain after limiting, and then recovery, which is kind of like a release, and then your ratio, so how much of it is actually working. So I'm just going to kind of run through this, and I do like to put a subtle setting on this sometimes, so I will kind of run through that and show you what I'm going to do. Where that's sitting, it's not really doing much, and if you could tell, there are different selections up here. You have original, modern, and then limit, which actually hits it a lot harder. I put on original. I think that's what sounded best for the genre of music, and I only hit it subtly, and then I even turned the mix down a little bit because I don't want it to be too noticeable. I want it to be real smooth, and I want it to do its job well, because I am going to add other plugins for compression and limiting, so I just wanted it to work real subtle. That way when we get to the other plugins, we don't have to do so much work. And you also have a duo and a mid-side chain, or a mid and side selection here. For most of these, I'm doing stereo, so it works on both left and right at the same time, just one selection. I don't need to get into changing my left and right separately, which is what duo is, and then mid-side is actually useful when you're doing EQ. So if you wanted the middle, maybe cut out some mids or some high end out of the middle, and then you wanted to cut out some low end from your sides, you could do that. You could select mid side here and open up this window. Now you have, this is your middle, so your kick, your bass, your snare, and then this is your side, so all of your cymbals, your guitars, everything like that. And if you did have vocals, that would be mostly in the mid-range there, except for your vocal effects such as delay and reverb and maybe chorus or something. If you had that on there, that would be more side, so you could further EQ those sections. I'm gonna go ahead and do that now just to show you what that would be like, and maybe this mix will come out different if I did so. Another awesome feature about this plugin is that you can listen to mid only, which is going to help out a lot. So as you can see, I'm already starting to EQ it a little bit different because I know that I want these things to pop out a little bit more, so I'm kind of adding some tones in those areas, such as the mid and the low mid and the low, because I really want the kick and the snare to come out. When I get to the side, I'm going to brighten that up a bit and get rid of the lows. So I'll show you what that's going to sound like. And then together, after doing both mid and side, we're gonna take a listen to that. right, that's cool. I'm going to keep it like that. I kind of like that. How you get out of this, just click right there. So moving on, this is our filter section. We're going to turn that on. This is awesome because you can add presence to it, and I kind of like the default settings on here. You're going to get some high frequencies, 10K and up, and then here's just how much you want in. So we're going to start at 0, and I'm going to add a little bit in. Okay, I only went 2 dB, and I went all the way up to 10 dB just to show you kind of how crazy it can get. The next section of this is your high pass, so where it's going to roll off at, depending on the genre and the type of mix. I'll either go 40 or 63. Doesn't completely cut everything off there, but it does a good job of getting rid of most frequencies below that range. So I'm going to start off with 40, and I'll even go up to 110 just to show you what it's like, but I'm going to keep it where I think it should be. Okay, I think I actually am going to keep it at 63 hertz. Reason being is because nowadays in the modern world, everyone listens to music in their car. Everyone likes to crank up the bass. Some people have subwoofers in the back. And if you don't take care of the bass in the mastering stage, things are going to get out of hand. It's not going to sound like a professional mix or master in modern day vehicles and stereo systems. So I'm going to keep it at 63 now. And we are going to do some stuff later that's going to help take care of that low end so it doesn't get out of hand. For this mix particularly, since it is the kick drum is heavy in this, I'm going to keep it at 63. So moving on, here's kind of our master area. You got your left and right. They're linked up right now, which is great because you can move it up and down. I like to keep it at 0. I don't get crazy with my gain or anything to my final stages when I'm trying to get the level up. I'm going to keep it in stereo. And the one selection that I mess with here is the spreader. It's awesome. It gets everything nice and wide. Even if you do have things panned hard left and right, you're going to notice a difference from that. I'm going to move it up probably no more than 2 dB, but I'm going to show you what that sounds like right here. As you can tell, I didn't go real crazy on it, but I have it at 2 dB where I wanted it, and that's pretty much it for the mastering chain. You can get crazy with a lot of stuff on here, but for mastering I like to keep it real subtle, and I think it really adds to the mix. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the plugin on and off so you can hear a difference of what this plugin's actually doing. So it's pretty subtle, but it's adding some width to it. We're taking care of those low frequencies, specifically in the side, which is awesome. And we got a little bit more presence to it, and some things popping out where I want it, and some things held back too. So I think it did a great job of that. Very subtle, but we did make subtle changes. So if you go crazy, you're going to make crazy changes. You go subtle, you're going to make subtle changes. And sometimes less is more. The next plugin that I'm going to use is the SSL compressor. This plugin is awesome. There's a lot of engineers using this on final masters, and once again I like to go pretty subtle with it, and I'll show you my settings that I have right now. I'm using I think it's the CLA, yeah, this CLA finalizer preset, and I did tweak it a little bit, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you what's going on. So for the ratio, it's around 4:1 right now, which is okay. I know that 2:1's a more common ratio for masters, but the reason why I'm okay with a 4:1 is because this genre is a little bit more punchy, and I also have my attack and my release set pretty low, and my threshold isn't set too low in the mix, so I'm only getting about 1 to 2 of dB reduction, which is okay. We want a little bit of pump out of it, and I do have a little bit of makeup on there. That way, when I do get to my final stages, I don't really have to boost the volume that much, so I'm being smart with my gain staging. I don't want to go to the last plugin and go, man, this track needs to go up 10 dB. So as I get down to my final plugins, I'm constantly boosting a little bit here and there, and this plugin actually does give a little bit of a analog characteristic to it. They do have the analog selection down here, which I have enabled. All it does is adds a tiny bit of noise and saturation to it. Nothing that you can really tell, but it's very subtle, and when you do it in small increments like I'm doing it in, it's going to add a difference. Sometimes noise is good and it helps glue things together, and if you have saturation, it sounds more lifelike rather than if you're using all digital plugins and it kind of just sounds stale. So that's why I have the analog selection on, which is cool. I don't really mess with the rate here and then the fade off. I don't have that on, but it is a selection there if you want to use it. But this is an awesome plugin. I use it on almost every one of my masters, and I would suggest getting it. It's very smooth, very subtle depending on how much you use it, and it just works great. You can't go wrong with the solid state logic compressor. Moving on, I've got the J37 tape machine here. This is kind of an option. This is another thing that's going to add saturation and a little bit of noise to your mix, and I think that just helps glue things together. This is another plugin that you can go crazy with, but I wouldn't suggest. I use it in a very subtle way. There's some really cool presets on here that really work. Right now I'm using the mastering high frequency smoothing around bottom stereo preset. I'm going to turn this on and show you what it's doing. Okay, so there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. I turned the wow effect up just to show you what that was doing. I actually really like that effect. It's very subtle. You cannot even tell that it's in there, but what it does is it makes it more lifelike. Really cool tape effect too. If you really wanted to make it sound like it was being played from a tape machine, you could do that. And there's a lot of presets on here to do it. They even have effects like delay and stuff. But I like going with these three here, specifically meant for mastering. I'll go with this one. Typically the noise is off, which is cool, because if you get too much noise, then it becomes noticeable. So I'm going to leave that off, and then there should be a little bit of saturation, which there's not. I'm just going to go like this. You're not going to be able to tell too much, but it's going to add some of that liveness to it and get rid of that digital staleness. So my main purpose for using a lot of analog or tape simulators or modelers like this is to just give it that realness, as if it were recorded truly analog. But a lot of these Waves plugins actually do a tremendous job of modeling that for you, and you kind of get that liveness out of your recordings. So if you didn't want to use the J37 plugin, you can use the Abbey Road's Vinyl, which does an awesome job as well. A lot of cool presets in here. I'm going to go through and just pick a random one, and then we're going to mess around with it. So we're going to go with the mastering starting point. You have a couple different options between lacquer and print. I normally stay on the lacquer. And you have your while selection and your flutter, which is also on the J37. And then you have clicks over here. They're kind of like little artifacts and stuff. I don't like to keep those in for masters. It's kind of a creative effect. You could put it on single tracks if you wanted to, or vocals, or whatever. And you have same thing with the crackle, more artifacts, and then you have a little bit of noise, which is some background saturation. Kind of helps glue things together. Not really noticeable to the ear, but when you have it set up like that in small increments, like I said before, adds a sort of glueness and realness to the master. So I like to put a tiny bit of that in, and you have your phase distortion, and you can set up frequency ranges in which you want that to be heard, and it's basically just a saturation. So you have different turntable setups here, kind of vintage, and then you have like a little DJ setup, and then you have different cartridges, so kind of like your needle selections, they have different characteristics. The really cool thing about this, and I've used it before, is you have a slowdown effect. It'll warp it down, kind of like a drop off. The way that you can use that is to take a bus or an instrument and send it to a new track and record it right on that track and then throw it in your song. It's really cool. I'm going to show you guys what you can do with that. So that's really cool. You can throw that in at the end of a song or right before a drop or something, or a breakdown. So I kind of like that feature in there. So I'm going to play this song back, turn it off, and then I'm going to bring it in and show you what it's doing. It actually is adding some characteristics in some certain ranges that you wouldn't expect. It's a really cool plugin. What I actually noticed was kind of a mellowing out, kind of the track as a whole. Did bring up the level a little bit. I did notice some saturation and some warmth to it, which is cool, some liveness. So what I'm going to do now is kind of choose my pick between the J37 or the vinyl, and I'm going to leave one of them in. For now, I'm going to go with the vinyl. I think it's kind of bringing up some stuff that I want to hear. Sounds a little bit rounder, a little bit warmer. So the next one that I'm going to put in is a dynamic EQ, and I like using the F6. This is going to help keep things in control. It's almost like a multi-band compressor, but it's an EQ that dynamically moves when a frequency kind of gets out of hand. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. So I'm going to start off with just a mastering preset. We'll go with the mix tighter. So as you can see, it kind of throws some frequencies out of whack here. So all I'm going to do is set those back down to 0. Bring this up here. And then I'm going to move this to 125 because that's where a lot of problem frequencies are. I'm going to make it a little bit tighter here. And I'll bring it up. I'm going to move it in a second, but I'll bring it up for now. And then this one, we're going to move eventually somewhere from about 500 to 1K. So I'm just going to leave that there. For here, once again, I'm going to take off, let's set the sides. I'm actually going to put that in stereo, and I'm going to bring this up to about 50 for now. And this is actually going to be the first thing that we're going to move. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm still hearing a lot of bass, specifically in this one right here in this range. So I think I am going to go around, I'd say 80. I'm going to still keep the gain here, and I'm going to set my threshold, and I'm going to allow the range to go down to about 1.5 dB. Okay, all I did there for this one was I actually did bring the gain down 1 dB, and then I made the range 2 dB because it wasn't doing much for me, but I set the threshold right where the peaks were. That way it holds that in line. We're going to get a number 2, which is actually already working because the range is set to -8, which is fine because that's a problem frequency. I'm going to play it back, and I'm probably going to end up lowering the gain a little bit and setting the threshold, keeping the attack and release around the middle. So medium attack, medium release. That's fine with me if you wanted it to be a little bit punchier or kind of hold it down a little bit more. You could either set the attack quicker or the release slower. Okay, all I did was adjust those in a way that they're hitting my frequencies a little bit better, and they're more subtle because I felt like it was kind of taking it out in a more noticeable way, and I want everything that I do to be less noticeable but work better and be more pleasing to the ear. So I'm going to skip up here to my high end, starting with 6, and we're going to do the same exact process. Alright, all I did there was kind of move some things around and really just set the threshold. I'm not taking too much off in the range. Everything's still set to 0 here. And then what I did was I moved 5 to the 2K area because that also is a problem area. So the last one we're going to do is kind of the middle here. Like I said, anywhere from 500 to 1K. Normally, where you get kind of an annoying mid-range nasally sound is around 800. But really, that could be anywhere from 500 to 1K. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the gain a little bit. I'm going to make this a little sharper shape. We're going to just kind of move it around and find the frequency that's kind of most displeasing to the ear, and we're going to get that out of there. So it's kind of even throughout. I think it really is more prominent in the 800 range. So I'm going to leave it around there, around 800. All I'm going to do is make this shape a little bit bigger. Then I'm going to bring the gain down. Maybe half a dB is all. And then looks like I need to make my shape just a tad bigger there. That'd be good. And then I'm going to set the threshold and the range, which will be probably 1 or 2 dB. much all I'm going to do there. Moving on, this is usually my last step. We're going to be using the Waves L316. This is one of the best mastering plugins you can get from Waves. This too is kind of like a dynamic EQ, but it does it in a better way in that you have a limiter, so you can raise your volume up, and you can actually select. It has a priority kind of category here for each one of your frequency selections, and raising that, all that does is choose which ones you want to be limited the most. Then you have your gain, which I will roll off some low end, and then you have your frequency range, how tight you want that to be, and your shape, whether it's a shelf or a bell. I'd imagine this one's a high shelf. Yep. Once again, just for kind of time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and choose a preset. It's also easier to start out with a preset and do it that way rather than starting from scratch. So let's just go with basic one, and then we're going to move it around from there. Okay, so all I did there was kind of adjust my gain, put most of them down at 0, and then for the high shelf, actually raise that one up a bit. That way you can get a little more presence and kind of a clear sound out of it, and that's where a lot of the cymbal hits are and everything. Brings some life and realness to it once again. And then these yellow sections here are where I want the most limiting to be for those instruments. That's kind of where the snare and the kick are. And the reason why when we set it up originally there's a big curve here is because that's where a lot of vocal ranges are. But in this particular mix, we don't have vocals, but we have a snare drum. It's kind of going to do the same thing there. Right now you can't actually tell what it's doing because I don't have the threshold set. The only thing you can really hear are my gain areas. So next thing we're going to do is set the threshold. Alright, that's pretty good. I usually don't let it go below 1 dB, and I'll keep the release here at 1. If you wanted it to hold a little longer, sound a little smoother, you could always increase that or decrease the release time if you wanted it to be a little bit more pumpier. So now all we really have to do is raise the out ceiling all the way up to 0 dB, and that'll give us a good level for our mix. What else you can do with this plugin here, they have a release character. So with your limiting, you kind of have a character with it. I like to go with the analog characters. They have stuff for drum punch, vocals, bass. If you can think of it, they probably have it. For now, I'd say let's go with one that I haven't used yet. I may have used all of these, but check out the drum punch. That's cool. cool. I kind of like that. I think we're going to go through a couple others and find the best one. But I was also changing the separation feature that they have here, and that just kind of determines how separated your ranges are, where you have your priority setting. So if you want it to be really narrowed down to a specific frequency, you could do that. If you want it to be a little smoother and kind of hit some other ranges, then you would go to the low setting. But I'm going to keep it for now right at medium. I think it's working pretty well, but we're going to check out some other characters that we can use. For this one, I think I'm going to go with the warm classical. It's really hard to tell difference, very subtle, because I don't have my threshold set super low and my priority lines are only up to, it looks like 3 dB. So it's very subtle, but I think for this particular genre and this track, we're going to go with the warm classical with medium separation. The very last step that I do is I actually dither my tracks. So if you're recording it 24-bit or even 32-bit, you always got to dither it down. So you have selections to go from 24, 22, 20, 18, 16. I'm going to keep it at 24 because some of these were recorded at 32. And then for shaping, I always go ultra. It's hard for me to tell the difference between type 1 and type 2. I just go with type 2 for good luck, honestly. But this is my normal settings when I dither. It's the final product right here. I'll play it back for you with none of the mastering plugins on. Here's with the mastering plugins on. Alright guys, those are my top waves plugins that I like to use for mastering. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more, comment if you guys want to see something else, or if you have any other waves plugins that you've used and liked for mastering. Thanks for watching. I'm Colin Childs, and I'll see you next time.